Welcome to the SkullKing Fantasy Football Podcast, powered by StatRoute.com. And now, here's your host, Ryan Skullroot.
Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Football Podcast for SkullKing Football. We are so happy to have you here with us tonight. We hope that you had a better week than some of the rest of us did for your fantasy
Speak for
teams.
yourself.
Hey, I had a
great week.
I had a better week this week. Instead of going 0-2, now that a couple of free leagues I did just for the fun of it finally started up, I went 2-3 this week instead. But that's what happens when you have some of the stings that we're going to go over today. Yes. We've got lots of them. So, per the norm, today is our Sunday night, which goes live for you guys on Monday. We are doing our Kings and Stings episode, going over the best and the worst performances of the week. And along with that, we're actually going to look at briefly the Monday Night Football game. There really isn't much to talk about for that one. Let's be completely honest. It's going to be a bloodbath.
Well, if the Browns play like the preseason Browns, if they play like the game against the Titans, it'll be ugly for other reasons.
Yeah, it'll be ugly for everyone if that's the way that game plays out. So that is what we've got going on. So why don't we go ahead and get into the headlines?
Today's headlines.
All right. Story number one. If you saw the game today between the Rams and the Saints, not a whole lot was going the Saints' way. And not just because of injury, but also because of the referees that really hosed them. Again. In a game between the Rams and the Saints. Unfortunately, Drew Brees was injured on a play. Aaron Donald came in to try to get to Drew Brees and ended up basically giving him a high five on his follow-through, and looked like it jammed Drew Brees' thumb enough that he was not able to squeeze a football or pick up a football with one hand on the sideline. He is seeing a hand specialist. According to reports, he's seeing a hand specialist today. Well, right after the game, he saw a hand specialist. And so we will know more on Monday and kind of take it from there. For those of you who need a super flex quarterback and a starting quarterback in your super flex like me now, it's pretty ugly out there, so
we'll have
just letting you
waiver
know.
wire additions for you tomorrow.
We will have those for you tomorrow. So, Justin, how badly does this kill everyone's production for the Saints? I mean,
I think it was evident by today, but not everyone's the Rams on defense. But then again, McCaffrey went off for God knows how many points last week against the Rams defense. It was evident that there is a severe drop-off with Bridgewater. I think he's only taken 25 snaps in the last 3 years since he's been there in real games.
Yeah.
Taysom Hill has more snaps than that. To me, Taysom Hill gives them more random plays. And Hill's got more snaps, and I don't know. The hope is that Brees is not out for a long period of time. You saw that everyone's production took a severe nosedive. The only person I would think gets a bump, and we talked about this before the show, because I'm not high on Jared Cook. I don't think he's a tight end. He's definitely not a top 8 tight end for me this year. When a backup quarterback comes in, tight end is like one of the go-to checkdowns. So Jared Cook almost has more value with Bridgewater at quarterback than he does with Brees.
Well, he did have 7 targets today. So
yeah, more than the week before.
Yep.
So it is rough. I think the team that is worse off is the Steelers.
Yeah, which we're getting to next. According to reports, Ben Roethlisberger with his elbow on his throwing arm is having an MRI Monday, and we will know more on what the status is with him. I actually didn't mind what Mason Rudolph did in the second, basically from the second quarter on. I mean, it was definitely shaky, and what he needs to do is he just needs to never throw to Dante Moncrief ever again, because that's, I believe he only threw one interception. He may have thrown two.
He threw one.
And the one interception went right through Moncrief's hands and popped right up in the air for McDougald to catch. So
Moncrief is catching a lot of flack from fantasy owners the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's ugly. I honestly
3 for 10 in week 1.
Yep.
Not good.
So, I think that, I mean, honestly, it's going to be rough, and it's going to be rough for the Steelers. I think that Mason Rudolph will be serviceable in a super flex league as your second quarterback based on matchup.
Yeah.
And that's simply because of the offensive weapons that they have in Juju Smith-Schuster, James Conner-ish for now, which we'll get to in a second. And, Jalen Samuel's able to catch the ball. Again, you talked about backup quarterbacks and their knack of hitting tight ends. Look what happened with Vance McDonald had 2 touchdown passes from Rudolph today. So,
to me, the one thing that I'll throw in here, the reason why the Steelers are worse off is they're 0-2. They still have to play Baltimore twice.
Yep.
They got to play Cleveland, although unless Cleveland can look better, that just looks like a bad game in general. The hope is that Roethlisberger isn't out for a long time, but if it's an elbow thing, it's both Roethlisberger and Brees' throwing arm hand.
Yeah.
It is not one of these things to where, it's the offhand where it'll hurt a lot, but he can still kind of produce. No, this is legitimately like the worst area for a quarterback to be injured. I'd rather have his leg hurt than his throwing arm hurt.
Because you can always put a brace on the leg and just throw him back out there.
Yeah, but the Saints are 1-1. They had a miraculous game last week. They ran into a tough road opponent this week. It was going to be tough sledding with Brees there anyway. The Seahawks do not typically travel well to the East Coast for the early game. And that's evident in that
in their defense.
Rudolph was still able to produce and keep them in the game in the second half.
Well, what really kept it close was the fumble by Carson on the 5-yard line.
The second one?
Well, yeah, his second fumble
Bitter
on the
about
5-yard line.
2 fumbles by Carson. Thanks, bud.
So
I'm okay with it.
So yeah, that's definitely the big thing that kept Pittsburgh involved there, because they were doing a good job of moving the ball against the defense. And so yeah, they're definitely in trouble, especially in that. I think Baltimore is the cream of the crop right now in that division.
They look like they could run the table.
Well, in that
they've
division,
also played.
Yes,
they've also played Miami and Arizona.
So
just like Dallas has played Washington and the Giants, and they're 2-0. Let's not get too excited.
All right, moving on. We've got just a couple other extra headlines that we wanted to go over. I wanted to see. I have to pull it back up here because I lost it there for a second. Before any of the games today, it was actually rumored that the Miami Dolphins, everyone knew that they had granted Minkah Fitzpatrick the permission for his agent to seek out a trade. Apparently, before the game, I believe Jay Glazer announced that they had been actively seeking trading partners for Kenyon Drake as well. So Minkah Fitzpatrick and Kenyon Drake apparently are on the table. There has been, and
the real question is, while you're thinking that thought, is once these two are gone, who else is left?
Josh Rosen. That's about it. Devontae Parker.
Okay, I normally don't feel bad for professional athletes because they make a significant amount of money. Yes, they play a rough sport, specifically in football.
I rarely feel bad for Cal Bears either.
But
as a Husky
for
fan,
goodness sake, he played for an atrocious team last year. Got traded with the upside that things could get better at a different situation. Sometimes you just need a change of scenery.
Yep.
It happens in life. It's just something. Maybe that's a job. Maybe that's a new house. Whatever. You need a change of scenery. Well, I think his scenery got worse.
Yep.
Because now he's the backup at a worse team with a worse defense, as hard as that is to imagine. That has I forgot to look it up before the show. I think given up the most points ever in the first 2 games of an NFL start to a season.
Yes, the Miami Dolphins have started off this season. What was the total? It was
112 points or 102 points.
100, because it was 43 and 59, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah,
102 points.
They've lost 102 to 10 in their first 2 games total.
And they weren't that close.
No, they weren't. And so here's the thing. I don't know. I mean, there are some running back desperate teams out there that could use someone like Kenyon Drake. Not that I think that he's all that special, but he also hasn't really had much of a line. Minkah Fitzpatrick could really help out a defense. There was a rumor that 20 teams had contacted Miami. I believe it was in that same Jay Glazer report that 20 teams had possibly contacted Miami about Minkah Fitzpatrick.
None of those teams better be New England or we're all screwed.
Yeah, seriously. Well, they've got Patrick Chung, who's been arrested for cocaine possession or whatever it was. So but
their defense doesn't need help at this point.
No. However, the Seahawks could really use a solid safety to go along with Bradley McDougald because he can only stay healthy about half the season. And Delano Hill and Tedrick Thompson obviously are not.
Well,
Tedrick
Thompson
either.
Is injured. So.
Well, he is now. Yeah, he's injured after last week, quote unquote injured.
That's what I like to call a sliver injury in the buttocks.
So that's
bench.
That's definitely something to watch after. I think that Minkah Fitzpatrick could definitely really make waves. And just so you know, I believe that the Seahawks have a first rounder and 4 second rounders right now.
Yep.
And could offer a second rounder for Minkah Fitzpatrick, and possibly maybe another late rounder or a well, they've got 4 as of right now, 4 possible compensatory picks. So they have firepower that they could use to send to Miami. So, one other quick note, James Conner went out with a knee injury. We do not know how severe that is. He did not return to the game, and therefore Jalen Samuels finished the game, so he might be a waiver wire ad. We'll have to wait to see what's going on with Conner's knee. And Damian Williams, I believe, also went out with a knee injury and did not return. Got a little extra time for Darwin Thompson. Darwin Thompson. And so that's definitely something to look at. I don't think that McCoy is the all-around carry-it-all type of back anymore. So if Williams is going to miss time, Thompson is a guy to keep your eye on the waiver wire. So
yes.
And those are the only other major injuries that I saw. So we should be good.
But pay attention. The Eagles lost. At times in this game, they lost Nelson Aguilar, Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson. So Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson out.
Missed almost the entire
calf
game.
Injury and a groin injury, respectively.
Yep.
Dallas Goedert was forced from the game. Carson Wentz was forced from the game for like 3 minutes of game time. McCown came in and then went back out. Jason Kelsey, Nelson Aguilar were both evaluated for head injuries. Corey Clement was sidelined.
Man, that team got the snot beat out of them tonight.
This game was geared for the over at 52 points. Didn't happen because of like 3 interceptions in the end zones between the two teams.
Yep.
And that nonsense to the Eagles.
All right, so here we go. We are going to go. We are now going to move on to our Kings and Stings section and go over these pretty quick. We'll start off with the Kings. Number 1, King of the Week, Patrick Mahomes, 443 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Number 2, Lamar Jackson, 272 passing yards, only 2 touchdowns this week, but finished with 120 rushing yards.
Yeah.
And number 3 is Dak Prescott, 269 passing, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Justin, who are you selling in this group?
Of these 3, I'm still the same 3 from last week. I'm still going to sell Dak Prescott for the reason that I mentioned earlier. Dallas has played the Giants, bad defense, and Washington, we don't know yet. But their offense does not have any star power at all.
Nope.
And so, to me, it would be Dak Prescott. He's played 2 bad defenses. He's played 1 home game. Were they both home games?
No, one was a home game. Week 1 was a home game. Week 2 was away.
Week 1 was a home game. So he's played 1 home game. Patrick Mahomes is otherworldly.
Yeah,
if you watched the second quarter, like 260 some odd yards or something like that thrown in the second quarter, 4 touchdowns thrown. Still put up a bunch of yards in the second half, but no one scored in the second half. And Jackson has the running ability. 272 passing yards. His 120 yards rushing is typically like 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
In 6-point leagues. So that's where he's going to make up for it.
Yep.
And with Ingram going out for a little bit today, he's now their best running back now too. So,
Ingram did come back in. So
I know, but he went out for a little bit. But I still, the flexibility that he has, Pat Mahomes can make any throw. He can make better throws than Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to say that right now. To me, Pat Mahomes is the best quarterback, making the best throws. Travis Kelce caught a ball in a tight window. DeMarcus Robinson made 2 tight window catches. And Mecole Hardman had a 70-yard bomb that got called back for a holding.
And had a different, but had a different touchdown.
Yeah, but had a different touchdown. Mecole Hardman could have had 2.
Yep.
So, Pat Mahomes, Jackson, I'm going to buy. Dak Prescott, I'll still sell. But Prescott is playing way better than most anticipated at the start of the season.
Yeah, basically most other than Cowboys fans.
Yeah. They think every player is the best in the league. So.
All right, moving on to our running back Kings. Number 1, Dalvin Cook. I can't believe I actually still drafted him in the staff league, but he's doing me well so far. 150.
As long as you have Addison, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I don't have Madison. You won't trade him to me. Dalvin Cook, 154 yards rushing, 1 touchdown, 3 receptions for 37 yards. Number 2, Aaron Jones, 116 rush yards and a touchdown, 4 catches for 34 yards. And number 3, I'll bet this is who you're selling. Raheem Mostert, 83 rushing yards, 3 catches, 68 yards, and a receiving touchdown. Who are you selling in this group?
This one's easy because he's the 3rd running back. Before the season started, he would have been the 5th running back because Coleman would have been ahead of him.
McKinnon would have
been ahead of him. So this is a guy that basically from the practice squad at the end of the preseason, or would have been on the practice squad, comes in. Maybe the Bengals defense is just this bad, and Seattle just struggled mightily week 1.
That could have been.
To me, clearly, Breida is the one to own. Wilson, I would take at number 2. Mostert, who knows? Maybe
I think Mostert's better than
Mostert could take over Wilson.
I think Mostert's better than Wilson.
But Breida is clearly still the number 1.
Yep.
Dalvin Cook is the number 1 definitively. Aaron Jones is the number 1 in about a 70-30 split with Jamal Williams. But Jamal Williams also had a 15-yard receiving touchdown today. Yep. So clearly selling Raheem Mostert.
All right, moving on to the wide receivers. Number 1, DeMarcus Robinson. 6 catches, 172 yards, and 2 TDs. Number 2, Big Julio Jones, 5 catches, 106 yards, and 2 touchdowns. It helps that one of them was a 54-yard touchdown towards the end of the game. And Emmanuel Sanders, 11 receptions, 98 yards, a touchdown, and a 2-point conversion. Justin, who are you selling in this group?
To me, this would be Demarcus Robinson. Chris Godwin is the number one in terms of fantasy production right now in Tampa Bay. I still think that Evans, he's still recovering from the flu. He'll get back up to being the number one, but there were a lot of people who thought that of any wide receiver number 2 that could surpass their number 1, it would have been Chris Godwin with Mike Evans. Kenny Galladay is still clearly the number 1. They played a tough Chargers defense, and he still had 8 catches for 117 yards and a touchdown. Demarcus Robinson last week had 2 targets and 1 reception. So for him to now have 6 catches, 172 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and for me to buy him for the future, this is also with Tyreek Hill out. And the Raiders were missing 2 key starters that are out for the rest of the season.
Yep.
So I would sell Demarcus Robinson. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not looking for him on the waivers. But of these 3, the least likely, I believe, to appear on this again would be Demarcus Robinson, because you still got Sammy Watkins had 13 targets today. Mecole Hardman kind of plays, I think, between Mecole Hardman and Robinson, they're going to kind of duel
back and
with
forth.
The Tyreek Hill role. And Mecole Hardman had a touchdown. So we could be looking at next week Mecole Hardman being the top of the Kings, because we've had 2 different Chiefs receivers. We might go 3 for 3 because Hardman will be in that slot role. Robinson will be on the outside. Watkins will be on the outside, and they'll be playing against Baltimore, who's not the same defense of years past, but they're still very, very good.
Yep.
And that could be a shootout.
Yep.
So Mecole Hardman for the Kings. Calling it right here. Not really, but sure. Let's go for it.
All right, moving on to our tight end kings for today. Back on the list again. 2 guys. Mr. Mark Andrews, 8 catches, 112 yards, and a touchdown. Man, he's looking good in Baltimore right now.
Since Lamar Jackson became the starter last year for Baltimore, Mark Andrews has been a top 5 tight end every week since. And that's considering that they have Hayden Hurst, other tight ends in the backfield that can still catch the ball, can still be used as targets. Mark Andrews is a top 5 tight end since Lamar Jackson. So those of you who are able to get him later, that's a steal. You're looking at a top 5 tight end for the rest of the season.
Yep.
And he's been on the Kings 2 weeks in a row.
He is this year's George Kittle.
This year's
George
Kittle is like last year's Jack Doyle.
Number two is Travis Kelce at 7 catches, 107 yards, and 1 touchdown. Now, because we do this in half-point PPR, the number 3 is Will Dissly with 5 catches, 50 yards, and 2 touchdowns, but a close runner-up. So that was 19.5 points. Vance McDonald.
4 points.
Well, no, 0.2 points here. Vance McDonald finished with 19.3 points with 7 catches, 38 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So, Justin, of this group, who are you not buying? Who are you selling?
To me, it would be Will Dissly. We're looking at now. This is his 4th game.
Yep.
Now, granted, last year he had one of these 2, where he was on the Kings, but then got an injury. Now, I'm not projecting he gets an injury, but the week before he got injured, I think he had 1 target. He wasn't really that involved. He was also removed because of the injury. Vinette still gets a lot of playing time, although he doesn't really get involved in the passing game. Dissly is traditionally a running player, so a lot of the passing plays that he gets, I've got
a lot of play
back
action.
At the snap percentage is play action and audibles out of the run.
Yep.
if this is going to be a straight up passing play, odds are probably 70% of the time Vinette's coming in.
Yep.
Because Vinette is a better runner, more streamlined in order to get out into the pass. So if they're going to be lining up on the line and they want to show a potential run, then Disley's going to be involved. But once again, the up and down, we already said Mark Andrews has been a top 5 tight end for like the last 7 weeks. We're always going to see Travis Kelce on this list.
Or at least close to it.
So he will show up on this multiple times the rest of the season. This could be Disley's only one.
Yep. The thing that helps out Disley is the fact that because he is a run blocking tight end who can catch the ball, is he is used a lot in the red zone because of how much they run down there.
Yeah, probably one of the better run blocking tight ends in the league.
Yep. All right, moving on to the QB stings. Now we have a couple of asterisks on these because of injury. We normally don't include injuries, but because of how bad these ones were and how much they really hurt people.
These were starters in almost every league.
Yeah. So Brees obviously is sting number 1, 38 yards passing, 1 interception. Went out in the first quarter, I believe. Number 2, Big Ben, 75 yards passing. No touchdowns, no interceptions. Went out with the bad elbow beginning of the second quarter, I believe. And our overall, best actual sting, who actually played a full game, Mr. Cam Newton, 333 yards passing, but no touchdowns, no interceptions, 2 rushes for 0 yards, and he lost a fumble. So, Justin, who do you see? I could see Cam Newton being back on this list with his shoulder. His shoulder still seems to be a mystery right now.
Yes. I threw out one of those gifts, and I try not to be mean to players because I respect how difficult the game is. But of The Office and Scott, I just forgot his first name. How can I not remember that?
I don't know. I never watched The Office.
Michael.
Yes.
Michael Scott going like this with glasses on, because it looked like he was hit a lot, so I don't credit those, but he openly missed receivers left and right.
Yep.
I think the delay got to him mentally.
That could be.
So
how long was it? Like 30, 45 minutes?
30 to 45 minutes. We saw a similar thing here in college, University of Washington. A week ago Saturday, played California, had a 2-hour delay.
2-hour rain delay, yeah.
2-hour plus delay. The game finished at 1:30. So and both teams didn't really look that good after the delay anyway. But of these 3, the most the one that is the one I'm selling that would not end up on this again, or that would end up on this again.
Who do you think is going to end up on this list again?
Cam Newton. Or Roethlisberger, but I'd give the edge to Cam Newton because he's going to be healthy and will play next week.
And again,
I don't think Roethlisberger or Brees plays next week.
Yeah. Honestly, both. I think that based on the type of injuries, I think that Brees is more likely to come back in the next couple weeks.
Yes.
Elbows are trouble for a quarterback. Thumbs, it all
Can't throw
depends.
Football without a thumb, but still.
Yeah, but elbow, because of how much strain actually goes on the arm, especially in the elbow. All right, moving on to the running back stings. Number 1, and these are guys that are owned in 90+% of leagues. Okay, running back sting: Tariq Cohen, 4 carries for 18 yards, 5 targets, 2 catches for 7 yards. That's a long fall from what was it last week? It was like 10 targets, 8 catches for 70 yards or something like that.
Yeah.
Number 2, the second biggest sting, run CMC, Mr. Christian McCaffrey, 16 carries for 33 yards, or can't even read my own writing, 33 yards, 6 catches, 6 targets, 2 receptions, and 16 yards. And then the third is Alvin Kamara, 13 carries for 45 yards, 3 targets, 1 catch, 15 yards, and had a 25-yard reception called back for holding. This really screws with everyone's rankings and ranking accuracy when these kind of things happen.
It does, but everyone put both of those in their top 5.
In their top
I don't know
5,
if anyone
yeah.
didn't, so it kind of levels everything out. But of these 3, the one that I would put as most likely to return to this list would be Tariq Cohen.
Yeah.
For the simple fact that last week he didn't get a single rush. He was used in the passing game primarily.
Yep.
10 targets, 8 receptions, 49 yards. This week, he got less opportunities by 1. Played another tough defense, but you can't negate what Christian McCaffrey is and what Alvin Kamara is. We are 1 yard short of talking about how Christian McCaffrey had another 6 or 7 points because of a touchdown to go ahead. Bad play call by North Turner to go wildcat on the goal line, 4th and goal for the game. Dumb decision, even with Cam Newton not being able to hit the broadside of a barn in the game. But just a bad decision. You're never going to sit Kamara or Christian McCaffrey.
Nope.
There is a world, maybe in an 8-team or a 6-team league, where you wouldn't play Tariq Cohen. Aside from injuries, you're always going to play Christian McCaffrey. You're always going to play Alvin Kamara.
Yep. All right, moving on to the wide receiver stings. Number 1, D.D. Westbrook has lost so much value with Nick Foles gone. 5 targets, 1 catch, 3 yards out of D.D. Westbrook. Number 2, Josh Gordon, 5 targets, 2 catches, 19 yards. Thank you, Antonio Brown. And our third sting is Robert Woods. 1 rush for 9 yards, 2 targets, 2 catches for 33 yards. Justin, who are you buying to show up on this list again?
Dede, and it's not close.
Yeah.
I think, regardless of what Bill Belichick says, I think they were trying to feed Antonio Brown the ball.
They were.
There was a report before the game started that they were going to try and feed Antonio Brown the ball, and it was evident as it started. So regardless of what Bill Belichick said about I'm just running the offense and that's all I've been doing for the last 20 years, they were noticeably, maybe Belichick wasn't, but Tom Brady definitely was. So let's just be clear. TB12 it saw his new shiny toy and utilized the crap out of it.
Yeah.
And so could have done a whole lot worse, but they were killing Miami. So I don't think they really needed to push
the
passing game.
No.
And so I see Gordon returning to a king potentially in later weeks. That wide receiving core may be one of the top wide receiving cores in the league now, outside of the Rams and Atlanta. And
they're better than Atlanta.
Huh?
I think they're better than Atlanta.
Atlanta's got a great number 2, and I would take Ridley over Gordon personally, because there's less weapons. At New England, they could go with running backs all day.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
So that's where I give a little bit of an edge in terms of fantasy production. But
yep.
To me, Robert Woods, just a bad game. I think Goff's having some issues. Played some tough defenses in the first couple of weeks. That's going to go away. They're going to play some easier matchups.
Yeah.
Robert Woods is going to consistently be there. All 3 of those receivers are going to be wide receiver number 2s.
Yep.
So they're going to have great weeks. They'll have consistent 2 weeks, but they may also have some stinkers. And so D.D. Westbrook has disappeared. He was salvaged by a touchdown last week. He had 5 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown. That's the only reason he was somewhat fantasy relevant. This week, down to 5 targets and 1 catch against a Houston team where Drew Brees threw for 300-plus yards, and we all talked about how Drew Brees was not going to throw tons of yardage this year. And we're talking about how Drew Brees, this may be kind of the beginning of the end type of a thing based off how his throwing production decreased rapidly over the last couple of weeks of the last season. So he was primed for a good game. Full week of practice with Hunter Minshew or Gardner Minshew. Didn't happen. So I'm very concerned. Tougher defenses coming up. Tennessee and Denver. I'm very worried about D.D. Westbrook. He's more than likely going to end up on this list again in the next 2 weeks,
or may become so irrelevant that he won't ever end up on this list, because we try to keep these stings to 70-80% owned, and D.D. Westbrook was right on the line.
He might be dropped in a couple of leagues, but also his projection is also going to significantly drop as well.
So
we also base these things off of the projected points as well.
Correct. All right, so the tight end stings. Number 1. Man, everyone was so high on the rookie, wanting to start,
And I said danger.
TJ Hawkinson.
I said last week, I believe I said that this player is more likely to end up on a stings list again before a kings list again.
And what do you know? TJ Hawkinson, 3 targets, 1 catch for 7 yards. Number 1 tight end sting. Number 2 tight end sting is Jared Cook, 7 targets, 2 catches, 25 yards. And really, we only have 2 on this one simply because the tight end position is so just all over the place. There really isn't another highly owned tight end. I mean, Austin Hooper, 4 catches for 34 yards. In half-point PPR, it's 5 point. I mean, that's not really a sting for the most part.
It doesn't hurt.
Especially considering he was probably, in a half-point PPR, he was probably only projected for 7 points.
Yeah, 6 or 7 points. So that's not too far off.
Yeah.
Almost hitting projection. And he was thrown to, in the red zone, one of the interceptions in the end zone was a target to Austin Hooper.
Yep.
And had it not been for the screen pass that went 70 yards and a touchdown for Julio Jones, Austin Hooper could have gotten more production going down the field.
Yep. And then, another sting, I guess you could call, was George Kittle, 3 catches for 54 yards. He was probably projected for 12, 13. So, I mean, that one may be
another 6.5. That could be
technically
sting.
be considered a sting. Only finishing with 6.9 points in half-point PPR, when, again, he was probably – well, let me actually see. What was he projected for in half-point PPR? Oh, it doesn't say. So, yeah, he was projected for, I'm going to guess, probably 11 and finished with 6.9. So, yeah, I guess you could call that a sting. But
for me, I'd have to give it to TJ Hawkinson. He's a rookie. He did play an infinitely better defense.
Yep.
But that's not saying much considering that Arizona is one of the worst defenses. So considering how many yards that they've given up, I would definitely have to go with Hawkinson here being the sting. Jared Cook, I'm not really that high on anyway, but most likely to end up here considering the injury to Brees and him having a little bit more stock over the next couple of weeks. I would definitely go TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah, I agree with you there. All right, real quick, and this is going to be really quick. We are going to preview the Monday Night Football game. We've got the Browns visiting the Jets. The Browns, for the most part, I believe, are completely healthy. The Jets are down C.J. Mosley as a linebacker, Quinnen Williams, a defensive line. They are down their quarterback, Sam Darnold, for 3 to 7 weeks for having mono. Le'Veon Bell is questionable because of a shoulder injury. Do I dare go on anymore?
What's going to happen to Crowder? What's going to happen to Crowder? Is Robbie Anderson going to pull up with a hamstring injury in this game? Hopefully not, but could happen.
I think with Trevor Siemian starting, do they have a tight end? I know.
Robert Griffin.
Is it Ryan Griffin, who used to be with the Texans?
Yes.
Yeah, he may get a little bump.
He is the tight end. I would not give any bump to him. He was not serviceable in Houston.
No.
So no.
He was just serviceable enough to steal production from what was it? Fedorowicz. CJ Fedorowicz when he was there. So this Nick Chubb should light them on fire. Really.
Yeah, considering they're missing Quinn Williams up the middle.
And C.J. Mosley.
And C.J. Mosley as their inside linebacker. This is a game that Nick Chubb should feast.
Feast.
They talked about this at the end of last week. I think Rashard Higgins was the one that came out and said this, that he thought that they were throwing the ball too much and they needed to do more run. This could be a game where Nick Chubb goes off if they focus on the run.
Yep.
I don't see, even with how bad the Browns played defense last week, I do not see this as a game that the Browns will lose.
Probably not.
That being said, I didn't think that last week against the Titans either.
And the Titans steamrolled them.
Shellacked them. Now, the Browns also had some horrible mishaps.
Yeah.
But Tennessee didn't play all that well against Indianapolis. And Indianapolis has a solid defense, but I would say that Cleveland has a better defense. So to me, this is where they right the ship. You're playing on the road, but you're playing against a backup quarterback who hasn't made a start since 2017. This is a game you should easily win. Of the wide receivers, I obviously believe that Jameson Crowder is going to be the number one here from the get. He's going to play in the slot. He'll be that first check down or the first look on routes. I am very nervous about anyone who has Le'Veon Bell in this game. You've got to play him, but if he's already had an MRI on his leg,
it's his shoulder. It's his shoulder.
Or his shoulder, I should say. He has not played a full season except for one time, and there's already concerns about an injury, and you're going into a game where you no longer have your starting quarterback, so you're now a one-dimensional offense, realistically, and you're playing against monsters on the other side.
Would you, here's something, if you guys have the ability, if Ty Montgomery is available and you have Le'Veon Bell, you better pick him up.
Yes. You should have picked him up last week.
Well, yeah, you should have had him already. But if
I picked him up again.
I drafted him in our monster listener league just because there's so many people.
Too many, 16 players.
16
player bench. Or
12 player bench in a 16 team super flex league. It's ridiculous.
Needless to say, there's no waiver wire.
Not really.
Or you got to pay $66 for Gardner Minshew at quarterback.
Yeah, and you may be paying the same this week for was it Randolph Rudolph or whoever it is from the Steelers and for Teddy Bridgewater. So
no.
All right.
Bridgewater maybe.
All right. Well, that is it for tonight's show. We want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen.
Hang on, we got one more thing.
What are we missing?
We have to name who the winner was of Pick'em and Stick'em.
Oh,
you want to gloss over this and completely forget that this happened.
No, I was going to wait and just do it at Pick'em and Stick'em, but we can go ahead and do that now. Since this is the recap of the week. Justin's team, just as a reminder, Justin Flacco, Ito Smith, Terry McLaurin, Jason Witten, the Arizona defense, which actually scored less points than the Miami defense, and Brandon McManus. Justin won. He scored 53.38 points in half-point PPR. Beat me 53.38 to 47.04. My team again was Jacoby Brissett, Frank Gore, Danny Amendola, Vernon Davis, the Miami defense, and Dan Bailey. And really the difference in this, because he beats me by a little over 6 points, the difference was that Danny Amendola had a goose egg, 1 target, no catches, and McLaurin goes for 14.7 points.
Yes. Ryan, I do want to congratulate you this week on, outside of injuries, being the only person in all of fantasy football where Miami scored you more points than somebody else on your starting roster.
Shut up. Actually, no, that's not necessarily true. Think about people who would have started. Was it Deshaun Jackson or?
I said barring injury.
Oh, okay.
Alshon Jeffrey got
injury.
a 0.
Yeah.
Deshaun Jackson got a 0. I understand that. barring injuries.
Shut up, Richard. All right, so now we're
Salt.
done.
Just pouring salt.
All right, again, we want to thank you guys for taking time to listen to the SkullKing Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Ryan.
This is Justin.
And we'll talk to you guys later. Hey, SkullKing Nation. Thank you for listening to the SkullKing Football Podcast. Did you like this episode? If so, be sure to go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube to subscribe. Also, please leave us a rating and reviews to let us know how we can better help you rule your leagues.